And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenters. So Michael Frankfort is an elementary teacher at Anne Frank Public School, elementary virtual school, who has a wide range of experiences in science, mathematics, environmental education, social justice, and instructional pedagogy. He is the current chair of the York Region District School Board's EcoFair called Building Nature Connection, and is the chair of the Elementary Curriculum Committee for the Science Teachers Association of Ontario. Danny is also here with us. He is an educational assistant from Aldergrove Public School in the York Region District School Board. He supports a variety of learners who have identified learning differences, behavioral challenges, and English language learners. Danny builds a special connection with students who have been identified on the autism spectrum disorder. Danny also has been quite involved in presenting of workshops through a science and technology lens. He is also a member of the STAO Elementary Curriculum Committee and has co-facilitated many STEM and environmental workshops and presentations. So with that, I will pass it on to Michael and Danny. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Janelle and Jesse, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on a Friday evening with some nice weather outside and stuff. As Janelle had mentioned, I'm Michael Frankfort, and Danny, I'll let you say hello as well.
Hello, I'm Danny Ho.
And there's some of our info on the first slide there. As well, we have a bit.ly for the presentation today. So if you could, yeah, Danny's going to post that, or if, yeah, we'll post that bit.ly for you. So welcome everybody. And you can feel free to follow along on the bit.ly. There's a lot of information there. Some of it we're going to get to, and some of it we may not, but you have access to it. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to give you a little bit of information about where this EcoFair idea came from and how we've incorporated it into different areas of curricular, even in science and beyond science, and also how it integrates and it creates equity and it creates inclusivity for the students. One of the key things that we'd like to do today in a little bit of way is to make you feel a little bit like students, because as we all know, a good teacher always is like a good student. If you have questions and whatnot, Danny and I, as well as our amazing moderators, will do our best to keep checking the chat. You might see me move my head back and forth. I got a couple devices going here. So if we're all good, we're going to get started. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg conversation, where a number of years ago, when I was also working in Aldergrove Public School, there was an idea to create a community-based EcoFair. And sort of the catch line of the Building Nature Connection was to get people to connect with nature in their own backyards, as opposed to having to go to a provincial park or to go visit outdoors. How can we even just make connections with stuff that we do? And we were very fortunate to team up with some outdoor ed teachers as well as consultants, and we did get some ministry funding, which allowed us to have the EcoFair. And then in conjunction, we were able to create a resource which can be found on the STAO Connect website. And that link is right there. And that was myself and another former colleague of mine, also in the York Region District School Board, Teresa Wong. And even though this says experience sustainability grade 8, because at the time that was the grades we were teaching, teachers, myself and other colleagues have been able to use this resource for multiple grades. In fact, between Danny and myself, we've been able to engage students from grade 4 up to grade 8. And we've even had some high school students and post-secondary students come back and help us out. So there's a lot of cross-curricular potential stuff you can do with it. So what you'll see is when you go through the resource, you see a lot of it is focused on grade 8 and science and geography. But at the same time, the lessons on the right side, which on the website you'll be able to download as an editable Word doc, you can adapt it for everything that you're doing. There's also just under 5-minute video. And throughout the course of this presentation today. We're going to show you snippets from the video and kind of go back and forth. And, you know, like I had said before, if there are questions that come up, please feel free to put them in the chat because we love to go off script sometimes. Okay, so let's begin our journey.
Welcome to Experience Sustainability, a cross-curricular project for grade 8. In this project, the students will explore, research, and essentially experience sustainability with a focus on water in their local and global community. Because this project builds upon students' prior knowledge, it's suggested that you may want to do this project at the later part of the school year. In this project, the students will bring awareness or take action on an environmental water issue, and in doing so will gain a deeper understanding about the issue, about themselves, and their responsibility to be stewards of the environment.
So the project itself and the ideas here, I mean, and we're not going to go over every single point, but a lot of it is really looking at hitting a lot of cross-curricular strands, cross-grade strands. And really it comes down to having students and educators think and act like scientists, environmentalists, researchers, and really put the issues of the environment to the front. And one of the things that we like to really focus on is, you know, having students feel very passionate about being stewards of the environment and really focusing on the student voice piece by doing some hands-on activities. And the EcoFair, believe it or not, was more of an offshoot at the end that turned into something that became a 6-7 year journey. And obviously we didn't have an EcoFair in 2020. And we are crossing our fingers we can do something in 2021, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So overall questions in this resource, but it also can easily, you know, cross-curricular to others, is looking at the impact of humans on the environment. Because it was grade 8, and both in the geography and science curriculum, there is expectations that relate to water and water systems, but really it's like, how can students be empowered to think about sustainability, to think about being citizens of the planet, and to think about what we can do to change? And really, it's kind of interesting because this year I'm a full 100% virtual teacher, grade 6-7 split, kind of down the middle in terms of numbers and gender. And we actually engaged some of these, and these questions, and you'll see some student reflections a bit later. When we are in the middle of a global pandemic, a lot of the narrative changes. And, you know, one of the key things that, you know, we as teachers strive to do in the classroom, whether we are face-to-face or virtual or any other in-between model, is really getting to that point of having students feel that they can have an impact, that their voice is actually very important. And again, looking at some of the bigger ideas here, you can see a lot of the similar stuff, the impact of technology, and to be honest, especially this year, the impacts of social, political, economical, environmental. You know, a lot of teachers have asked me, like, do you really go into those conversations in the classroom of, you know, political issues, noteworthy stuff? And, you know, you do. I mean, and I think it's important to bring those things to the table. Obviously, with a certain lens of appreciation and understanding and mindfulness with the audience and the students that you're with. But really, when you're looking at environmental issues, it impacts everybody on a global scale, and it also has a local implication. So it's, again, a lot of these big ideas, which in the Ontario curriculum relates to not just science and not just one grade, but can really be impacted. And those of us, like myself, who are an elementary teacher, and Danny, who teaches in the elementary panel as well, we are responsible to teach more than just one subject. So we really got to find ways to make it interesting and engaging. And here's our next video.
In the first lesson of this project, students are exposed to a variety of media texts related to environmental sustainability and human impact. The idea here is to ignite the students' interests of environmental issues and to brainstorm some big ideas for their summative project. The students will be involved in determining some thick and open questions with exposure to these media texts. Some suggested resources are included in lesson 1 of this project. However, the teacher is encouraged to add any other relevant material to this lesson.
So you know your students best. And one of the ways that we are suggesting that you can start engaging your students in a lot of this rich discussion is to bring in different types of media texts. You know, whether it is an article, whether it is a website, whether it's a video, an interview, in this case, it's going to be an interview, an art piece, a guest speaker, or even visiting some type of organization, or bringing them into the classroom if you're virtual. And so what Danny and I would like you to do is we're going to show you this video, and it's a very interesting video because I'm I'll ask this question, and you can throw the answer in the chat. Have any of you ever heard of James Lovelock and his theory of Gaia, the vanishing face of Gaia? Anybody ever heard of James Lovelock? Pretty much what we expected. New to me, not me. Exactly, right? And so even the students look at this and go, oh, I don't know what this is. I think maybe a bunch of us know The Hour, hosted by George Stroumboulopoulos. This is a short 10-minute interview. And the reason that we chose it is not because it's an interview, but because the topics and the ideas that are presented are not quite what we always tell students, right? You know, how being hopeful for the environment and sort of like we can all make a difference. And there's an interesting conversation here. And we do have some questions, which we'll show you in one moment. It's more of reflection questions and having the students think about, do they agree, do they disagree, right? And a lot of times, you know, students might be a little bit maybe lacking some courage to ask some big questions, especially on environmental issues. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to have you view the video. And I think the next slide has some reflection type questions, which you'll see. And it's not so much that you need to answer all these questions right now, but Danny and I would like you to think about these kind of questions as you watch the video. And as you're watching it, feel free to throw some stuff in the chat, and we'll talk a little bit. And then we're also going to look at some student reflections that are related to that. Any questions before we play the video? Nope. All right. Sit back and enjoy James Lovelock.
You know, we've all heard that global warming is destroying the environment, right? And that if we don't do something about it quickly, we're facing potential disaster. Well, that's the cheery version of the story. Wait till you hear what James Lovelock has to say. Lovelock is what you call an independent scientist. Some would say a maverick. He actually works in a lab that used to be a barn in Cornwall, England, and for years, he's been sounding the alarm on climate change. Back in the 60s, Lovelock started preaching what is now called the Gaia Theory, named after Gaia, Greek goddess of Earth. Basically, he says the Earth is one giant interdependent living system that regulates itself. It keeps chemical levels, temperature, and other conditions optimal to keep life going. And then we, humans, come into the picture. We cut down the trees, we spew out pollutants, and the system is thrown completely out of whack. Lovelock says, look, we can't undo the damage we've done, and by the end of this century, he predicts that many places on Earth will be unlivable, and most of the human race will be wiped out. So don't waste your time trying to reverse climate change, he said. Instead, focus on finding ways to survive the inevitable ahead. He lays it all out in his new book called The Vanishing Face of Gaia. Everybody, please say hello to James Lovelock. It's such a fascinating theory that you have, but before we get into all the details of it, I mean, tell me, how did you come up with the theory of Gaia?
Oh, well, it originated at the Jet Propulsion Labs in California a long time ago, 1965. But the name Gaia was given to me by a famous author. You probably know of him, Bill Golding. Lord of the Flies, that's right, and a whole series of other books. And I think he even got a Nobel Prize for Literature in the end. Yes.
So he just said, hey, you should call it. Like, how did that happen?
Well, you see, he was originally trained as a physicist. Most people don't know that, but he was. And he and I lived in the same small village in England. There's only 400 people there. And we used to chat in the village pub. And he was interested in what I was doing over there in California. And when I told him I got this idea that the whole planet was looked after itself, almost in a way alive, he said, well, you'd better give it a proper name. And I suggest you call it Gaia. And we went on talking for 20 minutes because I thought he meant G-Y-R-E,
right.
One of these great self-regulating worlds. He said, no, I mean Gaia, the Greek goddess, the goddess of the earth.
Now, did that idea come up early in the pub conversation or much later when we have different, when things have changed?
Well, that'll be telling.
So, you're right. So the idea of the world that regulates itself, the planet that regulates itself, is one thing. But now we're at this point, and one thing we had talked about is you say it's too late. Like we just need to deal with the inevitability. Just for people who perhaps haven't wrapped their head around it, what is your theory that says we're done?
It's not so much a theory, it's coming from observations of what's happening around the Earth. And it's always important. Observations are much more important than theories. We have plenty of theories. No, the Earth's been looking after itself for quite a while in what's called the interglacial, the kind of warm period we're in at the moment. But in the last few years, it started warming up. And this is a sign that it's moving away from the current state it's in to, it exists in stable states, either cold, middling, or very hot. And it looks as if it's going to the very hot period. And it's been there many times before.
And so, how long does it take to get to the place where we can no longer, like, are you saying that, you're not saying the entire human race will be wiped out, but you're saying
Heavens,
that...
no.
But a significant number. You're not talking about a party here.
I'm afraid so. As many as 7 out of 8 are likely to be wiped out, yes.
Is it certain parts of the globe that are going to be harder hit than others?
Very much so, and Canada is unusually favoured. This is the sort of place, when it happened before 55 million years ago, life not only survived, but things moved here to get away from the heat. And that's likely to happen again. But this time it'll be people moving. And I think the main problem for Canada will be how to handle the influx of people from outside the world and when to be able to say, no, we've got enough now. If we take any more, we can't feed you.
You know, the observation can sort of, you can monitor what's happening to the environment. You could take a look at, melting, peaks of ice, I guess, around the world. But how do you prove that it is more than that? Like, how do you say that this is what happened 55 million years ago? How would you get to that place?
Well, the evidence for 55 million years ago comes from record of sediments and looking back over the evidence, and it's pretty solid. It's like, they use the ice cores from Greenland or Antarctica, and you can tell what the temperature and the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere was any time up to 1 million years ago, indeed a lot longer than that. And it's that sort of evidence that is pointing to the changes that are taking place now as rather like changes that have happened in the past that are similar.
Is this something that, with your observation, you can say is because of humans? That's one of the big debates about climate change, is humans are causing this. Is this just an inevitability?
The best way to look at it is, think of yourself as somebody walking in a forest somewhere, and you pick up a gun, and you accidentally pull the trigger, and it goes off and does some damage. You didn't intend to do that. You kind of pulled the trigger by accident, and that's what we've done. We pulled a trigger on the system, and the system is now moving into another state.
So let's say, like, in centuries and centuries from now, this could have happened anyway, but we've just kickstarted the process.
Exactly.
Wow. So that means, then, that we should have a really good time, shouldn't we?
Well, it won't be all bad. No. There'll be some exciting moments, I think.
For sure. Is it reversible?
No, it isn't. That's the crux of it. I think a lot of people around the world, particularly politicians, the people who had the Kyoto meeting, the Bali meeting, they think that if we're good and we stop burning fuels and everything, it'll all go back to where it was. It won't.
Can we slow
Once it started moving, you can't stop it.
Can we slow it down?
I wouldn't say we can't, but I don't think we can.
I think politicians, and I think a lot of scientists who are tied to certain institutions are probably in a position where they can't come out and say what you can say, because can you imagine a politician saying, listen, we got about 100 years and it's a mess. So do you know that, is that a good thing or a bad thing that the community can't say that, or at least side with you?
I agree with you, absolutely. It's not only politicians, the scientists can't, because most scientists are employees of universities or governments and things, and their next round of grant funding depends on saying the right thing. If they start saying alarming things like that, they're likely to be in trouble. So there's a great limitation on everybody on what they can say freely. And yes, it's a very powerful influence.
Who funds you that allows you to do this?
I fund myself by writing books and by inventing things.
Okay, without giving away the patent, obviously, what's the thing you've invented that we need, that's coming down the pipe that we're going to be very excited about?
Oh, well, I mean, it was invented a long time ago as a thing called the electron capture detector. It's kind of provided the data that made Rachel Carson's story true, that, you know, the world was getting damaged by pesticides and things. And it's been around a long time. I don't own the patent for that. The US government took it.
Nice. Is that
without my permission?
Is it really? Do you find people in governments that are willing to listen to you and take what you say seriously? Because obviously what you say, there are a lot of people in the scientific community who might agree with you, but a lot of people say no. They disagree with you. Do you find people in government that can agree with you? Very much so, yes. I think politicians have a lousy job. I mean, somebody said it's the art of the possible is politics. Yeah. And no, I think they're always willing to listen, but whether they can do anything is another matter. In terms of energy, so people are talking about how do you find renewable energy sources, wind power, solar power, whatever. For you, do you look at it and say, what's now, understanding that it's over anyway, is there a place we should be focusing our attention on? Well, it's a matter of horses for courses. If you live in Iceland, you've got all the energy you need from hot rocks and stuff, so why bother with nuclear or anything else? If you live in Britain, you haven't any option. It's an overcrowded little island. You've either got the choice of burning fossil fuel coal or of going nuclear. Well, I think it's much better to go nuclear for Britain. Renewables are a joke. I mean, they will not supply anywhere near enough energy at all. But they're very, very good for business. You can make a lot of money going into renewable energy. So how do you... So the environmentalists don't like you very much, do they? No. Is there a chance you're wrong in your mind? Of course there is. I'm a scientist, and you can never be certain about anything. Mm-hmm. And one had better really realize that. None of us can be certain. So I figured that you must have really believed in what you're saying, because you're going to space, and I thought maybe you're going to try to colonize. Are you on the Richard Branson flight? Is that apparently you're on that flight? Yeah, it's the ultimate upgrade, isn't it? Yeah, no kidding. How did you get on the Richard Branson flight? Well, I guess Sir Richard Branson read some of my books and seemed to like what he heard, and he sent me an email saying, would I like to have a free ride up into space? So I said, you bet. Did he try to name something? Did he try to take your name, the Gaia Theory, or something, use Gaia to launch a product or something? I think he did, and I did email him beforehand saying, no, that was biofuels. Biofuels. And I don't think they're a good idea at all. And I said no objection to his using biofuels, but don't go and tie Gaia to it, because it isn't a Gaian idea. It's amazing. You got to read this book. It's called The Vanishing Face of Gaia. James Lovelock, everyone. Thanks for coming in. James Lovelock. All right, we'll be right back.
So, hope you enjoyed it. We chose that video on purpose. There's lots that you can unpack, and obviously we don't have enough time in an hour to unpack it. I think one of the key messages one of the key things that maybe students are a little bit afraid to talk about is the fact that we're talking about science, and it's an older white man scientist, male scientist. And you know, I think that it's really important to expose students to what a scientist can look like and does look like, and it looks like everybody. So there's always that conversation, and I always encourage that in the classroom with any students that I work with, as well as with educators that we present to. The message is very different. And what Danny and I were just curious, and if you can put it in the chat, Was there anything there that kind of piqued your interest or made you think, or you disagreed with something? And that's a big one, right? Like asking students to say, do you disagree with this video we just showed you? What do you all think? Or even if you want to just answer some of the questions, we'll give you, about 30 to 40 seconds. You can just throw some stuff in the chat there. As you're doing that, I just looking back and I notice, and Stephanie, you just posted. Stephanie, you said yep. So I'm assuming you said yep because you had heard of James Lovelock before. Is that correct? Yeah, awesome. And I see what you wrote. The climate refugees is an interesting idea and the connection to Canada. And, in schools, we do have a lot of conversation about the idea about what refugees are, what refugee status is in Canada, how people are coming from other countries based on a whole myriad of factors. But really that idea of climate refugees, it's such an interesting thing to think about. Stephanie, I hate to put you on the spot. Where did you hear about James Lovelock before? And while you were doing that, I see Haley has put in the chat, Canada being the place most people flock to, humanitarian issues, discussion with students, what it means to be a refugee or an immigrant. Yeah, exactly, right? And I can only speak from my own experience and Danny from his own experience, but a lot of students that we have taught in the last many years do come from families who have immigrated to Canada. Either it was the students themselves were born in another country, or their parents or their grandparents, as well. Some students that we teach are refugees. And so it's, again, one of those kind of conversation pieces, right? And Stephanie did an AQ course in geography, exactly, right? Interesting enough, I came across this video in a graduate course that I was taking, and it really, really stuck with me. So while we're thinking about this, Danny's going to go through a couple slides and show you, these are some answers from my own class this year, and we'll just go through it kind of quickly. So if you notice, I'm just kind of going to go over it very quickly here. Talking about climate change, students like to connect stuff to, polar ice caps melting, natural disasters, tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, avalanches, tsunamis, and then looking at, how things could be connected to weather and climate. And, it's interesting that this student that wrote, if you look at the second line there, it says, a change in weather is small and change in climate is large. Overall, it's more of a matter of wordplay or doublespeak rather than some scientific stuff. Now, some teachers may say, "Ooh, I can't believe a student is, talking about those kind of things." But why not, right? Why not have that conversation? I recall a number of years ago, a student in one of the classes I taught, grade 8, felt really awkward asking a question, but said, how polar bears are dying, they're drowning because there's not a lot of ice for them to float on, from ice sheet or, to ice sheet or different pieces of land. And the student said, maybe the polar bears are supposed to die. Maybe they're supposed to go extinct. It's a very interesting conversation, right? And it's a conversation about the idea of evolution, the conversation about things changing. And so there really is no answer there. But what Danny and I like to do is to really encourage people, the students, to not be afraid to talk about these kind of things. And we'll look at the next one. Just some stuff about droughts, storms, in terms of sort of scientific community. One student brought up something from the American Geophysical Union. Human-induced climate change requires urgent action. Again, it's what do we think about it? And even though, come to think of it, we're all attending the EcoLinks conference. I think we're speaking to people who are very much environmental supporters and want to give voice to this, especially with their students. So you're going to get students that kind of sit on kind of both sides or somewhere down the middle. And we'll check the other answers here. You should be able to, you can look over a lot of this stuff on your own. Here's what one of my students said, and this student was actually a little bit afraid to say it. Look at that first line. Doomsday pending is an eye-catching phrase meant to spark fear in an audience to draw attention, nothing more than this. Bringing up political issues, right? What's the narrative? Again, very interesting. And especially the middle to last part where the student has a wondering about politics and current politics. And the example there is comments that were exchanged between Donald Trump and Greta Thunberg. We'll check out some of the other answers in the next part. And again, you can see that these are two different student responses. One person doesn't agree with the Gaia Theory, and one student does agree with the Gaia Theory. So sparking the students' interest is where Danny and I are going with this. And anything that you can do to get them to think about things beyond the stereotypical standard narrative of global warming and climate change and different weather patterns, the more interesting your conversations are. But I would also advise, setting up the norms in the classroom and, knowing what kind of conversations you can have with that. So again, with your own students, that's okay, yeah. With your own students, think about different ways you can engage them. The overall project, which we're going to show you in the video in a moment, that we are presenting here involves a proposal, a presentation, a poster board and reflection, and the EcoFair is the offshoot that if you have time, you can do it. So we'll watch a short video clip now.
The second involves introducing the main components of the project, which consist of the proposal, the presentation, the poster board, and the reflection. Students will be using their experience with thick and open questioning from the previous lesson to come up with a research topic related to environmental sustainability. There is a suggested time for each component. However, teachers can use their own discretion based on the needs of their class.
The proposal is a group assignment that must be completed before the creation of a hands-on activity and poster board. Think of this as a blueprint of what the overall project will look like, and it should contain general information about the activity, the environmental issue, and its impact on the sustainability of water resources, either locally or globally. Once the teacher has approved and evaluated the proposal, the group may move on.
The presentation is a demonstration of their activity that supports and promotes their environmental issue in an interactive way. The poster component is a physical representation of the research. Please note that this resource discusses a physical poster board, but that other forms may be used, such as digital slideshows, websites, interactive whiteboards, three-dimensional models, etc.
The personal reflection piece is the individual assessment component of this project. Students are required to discuss their successes and challenges related to the planning and creation of the project and/or a hands-on activity, as well as their individual learning through this process.
So the next few slides are very much just a review of all the rubrics and stuff. And those things you can download and you can edit them as you see fit. One of the reasons that we decided to take a project like this and divide it up into different sections is to really allow for, I guess, two pieces. One would be that assessment piece that we always have to be cognizant of when we're teaching, and allowing those nice checkpoints so that you do have assessment along the way. Maybe the final project is not something that completely works, or the poster board falls apart, or whatever presentation they're doing doesn't quite work. We really like the idea of having these check-in points with the students. Also, if you think about it, a project like this involves different types of abilities, different types of learning, and different types of ways of engaging. And we find that with a project like this, that obviously is going to take a fair bit of time. You kind of embed that inclusivity and equity piece with your variety of learners in the classroom, from different areas on individual education plan, potentially any students on the autism spectrum disorder, and students, English language learners. And really, it's not so much about making sure that they write a science report, but it's more about engaging them in some type of issue that they're passionate about, and then creating some type of project. So just as an example, we had a group once that was really interested in looking at filtering water. Like how does water become clean? And I know that, and I'm guessing in a bunch of your classes, if you talk to students about your drinking water, they're all kind of grossed out that, well, that was in a toilet before and it goes through a water treatment facility and sewage treatment and all the chemicals and that stuff. So the students were interested in that process. Now we're looking at, grade 7 and 8 students, right? And so the decision was made to get some water and to make it dirty, put some dirt and maybe some salted pepper and some sugar and some marbles and some pieces of metal. And then they wanted to challenge people at their booth to make the water cleaner. And they provided them with different types of stuff like gravel, netting, filter paper, like et cetera. Anything you can do to kind of, remove the filtrate from the residue, right? A residue from the filtrate. And we, and because of that, we had to figure a way to test it. And so through doing some research, we showed them how to use pH paper. There wasn't a huge difference in color from the beginning to the end, but that's not the point, right? The point is they're engaged and they're trying to figure out a way. And in a small way, it's like, wow, this takes a lot of work. This takes a lot of energy. You have to really know what's in the water. You have to be able to let it settle. Yeah. So there's like all these kind of questions that come up. And then the other piece of it is when they get really excited and then they present it, right? And then they get to sort of get all excited and everything else that goes along with it. We had one group one time that also wanted to show separation of things. And instead what they did is they had like a wading pool, like a small kids pool, and they had different pieces of stuff in it. But everything that was pollution was metal. And then they had a fishing rope that fishing line that was made out of like a meter stick. And on the end, it had a strong magnet. And so the idea was you'd have to try to remove all the pieces out. It's kind of like one of those carnival games. But you don't get a big stuffed animal at the end. You get to make the water less polluted, which is, yay, more exciting. So what we'll do is show you a little video of the offshoot of what happens at the end. And this is where we get to our EcoFair. And this is just one example of a couple EcoFairs and some of the student interaction, as well as some of the eco partners that we were able to invite, and they came out and set up booths alongside the students. So we'll watch a short clip.
As an extra feature to this project, we had the opportunity to expose the students' projects to a further audience by organizing a large-scale eco-fair. This motivated the students to further develop their demonstrations and hands-on activities so that it would be more accessible to a wider audience. For our eco event, which was called Building Nature Connection,
where does tissue go? I think it goes in the garbage, definitely.
Students from the entire school, neighboring schools, and members of the community were invited to attend. We also were able to contact environmental organizations to take part in having interactive booths side by side with the students' projects.
Professor Steven, please tell us.
Okay, so it's true that for medicine things, mostly everything comes from trees, so this is stuff.
By doing so, the students' own research became more relevant and provided them with a greater purpose to their environmental issue.
So think about it this way. You know how schools sometimes have their like spring fun fairs in, non-pandemic times? That's kind of what we did, is we kind of connected what we were doing to different schools every year, because it wasn't always housed at the same school, and kind of connected it to their fun fair, but their fun fair became educational. We even had some times where we got a bunch of seedlings that were donated, and people who attended got to take home a little seedling and plant it at home or something. And again, it looks like fun, and it is fun. So it's a lot of work, and you have to be, in that mind frame to really put that effort in. But it really allows for kind of that student voice opportunity. Now, clearly, a lot of these things cost money, right? And so we have to be creative. And one organization, and there are many, one organization that has always been really generous with the fair and the project has been Learning for a Sustainable Future. We have kind of a longer video, and we're not going to show you the full video, but you do have access to it. And a representative from LSF, Samantha, will be talking a little bit. And I think, Danny, I think maybe we'll show about 5 or 6 minutes of it. But basically what it is they have multiple funding channels that are available. And one of the things that we really like to let other educators know is that any funding is good funding. Sometimes you have to fill out 10 pages of a funding application to get $100, whereas a quick phone call gives you $1,000. And you always have to be creative with it. But there is money out there to support projects like this. And I would encourage you to reach out. And again, we're not sort of partnering with LSF, but they've actually been able to provide us funding every single year. And they do offer some really cool programs. So we'll watch about 5-6 minutes of it, and then we'll do a little wrap up, and then leave some time for questions and jokes or, whatever.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much to Mike for carving out a little bit of time in his presentation to allow me to come on and share some of LSF's programs and the different ways that we can support you. So if you haven't heard of LSF before, Learning for a Sustainable Future is a Canadian charity that has been around since 1991. We are national, we work across the country, we work in both languages, and we exist to support teachers in taking on this kind of learning that Mike is talking about. We want to support teachers in incorporating sustainability concepts and practices into their teaching across every grade, across every subject, every day. So we have a number of programs that help support us in this. The first of which that I will share with you is Resources for Rethinking, or our database. So this was a project that we came up with in response to what teachers were calling the kit and run syndrome. So organizations would come to teachers and say, we have this great kit, you're gonna love it, see you never. And it was sort of gathered dust on the shelf because there was no context, there was no quality control, there was nothing that could help teachers actually use the resources that they were being provided. So we created R4R. So this is a database that is 100% free to access. And it has over 1,400 resources on there. And we have many different kinds of resources. We have lesson plans, we have children's books, we have videos, outdoor activities, and we've recently added a new category for things like apps, games, websites, and other. The database is fully searchable. So we have an English side of the site and a French side. And you can put in the province that you're in, so the curriculum that you're dealing with, the grade or grades that you're teaching, the subject that you're teaching, all the way down to the unit in some cases. And you can search through a great list of sustainability themes that we've put together. And we've recently added the ability to search by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as well. And then best of all, every single resource on the site has been reviewed by somebody who either is or was a classroom teacher, so they know what they're talking about, and they have been connected to curriculum in all the provinces and territories. So I would love to show you around the site a little bit. So this is what it looks like. And there is so much great information on the site. A great place to start is our search engine here. So again, you can put in the curriculum that you're dealing with. You can put in what grade you're teaching. There is a way to put in multiple grades if you're teaching split classes that I can show you in a minute. You can also put in what subject, got them all here. And once you've put in a province, grade, and subject, it'll go all the way down to the unit for you if you want to get that specific. As I said, our list of sustainability themes is here. It's very comprehensive, so there should be everything you're looking for. And for us, it's not just environmental sustainability issues. We have lots of social issues in here as well, economic issues, cultural issues. And like I said, we have all 17 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, plus the ability to just search for resources that are about the goals themselves. We also have 2 checkboxes. You can check this one to look for resources that have a strong action component, and you can check this one to search for resources that have a strong inquiry component. You can look for a specific type of resource if you like. But once you put in your information, it's as easy as hitting search and you get this great list of resources. You can see they are coded. These ones are all lesson plans. Got a lot of lesson plans. But as you go farther down the list, you get into things like apps, games, and other, that kind of thing.
Back to me. Sorry about that.
No, I was talking to myself actually because
Okay.
I forgot to unmute myself and I was just like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, wait, hold on.
Okay, so we're going to stop it there. Not because there's not a lot of great stuff. There's a lot of great stuff. Okay, but you have a copy of the video, and you should be able to take a look at it yourself. And it doesn't really matter if you're an elementary or secondary teacher, if you're a classroom teacher, if you're a prep teacher, if you're regional or administrator. You can find a lot of stuff that goes along with what you're looking for. Now, if we and we've included a lot of the slides there, and we'll just head over to sort of the last bit of the slides, and just to go to the recap. So when you're looking at this resource, and Danny and I are very aware that this is a very quick way of looking at it. We've given some suggested time periods here. I can tell you that both of us have been working with students on this. We're looking at 3 to 5 weeks really, and really integrating it into other subjects and really bringing some of the other subjects on board. Not just your science, your math, your literacy, your arts, your geography, your history, your social studies, even your health, and phys ed. But these are some ideas, and what we recommend is take a look on your own time, take a look at some of these things here, and always you have questions, you want to do sharing and stuff, reach out to us. Before we go to some Q&A, I just want to show you a recap video of one of the EcoFairs that we did recently. And you also notice that there is a guy dressed in a yellow duck suit. And funny story, short version, busker, he's now moved back to Japan, called himself Duckman. And we partnered with him for the EcoFair, but also the class that I was teaching at the time, we used recycled and reused material to create bucket drums. And that was a lot of the whole thing behind being able to reuse and reimagine. And a lot of those items that weren't destroyed after we turned them into bucket drums were actually redonated back to some of the thrift stores. So we'll take a look, quick video, and then a little Q&A. So just a little quick story there. The original music, Stu Weinberg there, he was a former student of mine, and the person who created the video was a former student in the York Region District School Board. So, you know, this looks like fun, which it is. And there's a lot of work involved, which it is. But this is just sort of a snippet of kind of the stuff that you could do. And I think one of the key messages is if you were interested in doing something like this, start it off small, build a foundation, get a good leadership group of students and staff together, and try it. Try something different, and see where it goes. And all we did was we tried something different once about 7 years ago, and it has gotten bigger and bigger every year. In fact, people were quite disappointed we couldn't have it in 2020, as you know, it is for many other kind of workshops and events. But yeah, and that's it. Janelle says you've seen Duckman before. Yeah, he's a fun entertainer. He's great. Are there any questions or anything from any of our participants and attendees?
I will just say that, Michael, you provided me with your Twitter. Is it okay if I share that in the chat?
Yeah.
All right. So if you want, you can follow Michael's adventures on Twitter. I'm going to just put it in his handle. And there is a question there, so you can go ahead and answer that.
Yeah. By the way, if you follow me on Twitter, a lot of crazy stuff. I actually did some duck hatching in my home while I was teaching virtually. Don't ask. Haley, you asked a really, really good question. So I currently teach a 6-7, and the EcoFair that you saw, the last one there, I was teaching a grade 6 class, and we actually were working with grade 5 and 6 students. So what we actually did was we took the exact same lessons, and we just kind of were more selective as to what media text that we were going with. Also, we had some prepared ideas of possible hands-on projects that the students could do. And so that way it wasn't so much just sort of coming up with something if students had some struggles. But it was pretty much the same idea. And now if you're adapting it to grade 5 and 6, grade 6, you have, you know, biodiversity. And then with grades 5, you're looking at the, remind me, my brain is foggy at the moment. I think you're looking at, yeah, exactly. I think you're looking at sort of the environmental, the weather and stuff. And you know what, if you think about it this way, if you brainstorm a list of possible ideas that they could use for their project, that can help them out. Plus, if you were going to do some energy, that's it, thanks. I'm mixing up because my brain is all in grade 6 and 7 at the moment. So thank you. And doing it small at first, right? And if you were thinking of doing a project like this even this year and you wanted to sort of touch base and stuff, Danny and I can give you some list of ideas and things. And, you know, you try to encourage, but at the same time, if students are struggling, you know, there's always ideas like, you know, well, how do you separate? Like, you know, for example, at home, you know, do you have a green bin? Do you have a blue bin? Do you have a garbage bin? You know, do you often find your parents, or if they live in generational homes, your grandparents and other relatives that can't sort things properly, right? Where does that go? So it's kind of those ideas that kind of work. Now, I don't know if that answers the question, but does it help you a little bit, Haley? Yeah, feel free to send Danny and I a message, or on Twitter, or emails at the beginning of the presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Michael and Danny. That was an amazing presentation, very engaging throughout and super inspiring. It's really great to see the students getting so engaged and learning so much and being able to really move that throughout their lives in different subjects in different ways. So I think it's like a super important thing that you've done. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I hope others are inspired to do the same at their school. And I know we're just wrapping up here, but in the realm of virtual, and sorry if I missed it, what's planned for 2021? Yeah.
Well, we're not sure yet. I think that this school year is probably not going to happen, but maybe we're hoping for something in the fall. And then if not, we'll see what we can do for 2022. One of the things that Danny and I, as well as the other educators that have been involved, is we've been doing a lot more of this kind of stuff, sharing with other educators, and still doing a lot of the work with our students, just that we can't get to the final stage, whereas the EcoFair. But we are still engaging our students in the same kind of work.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much. All right, well, that brings us to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for everyone who joined the smaller group, but it was a great group. It was really great seeing all the comments in the chat as well. Yes, I really hope that Michael and Danny, good luck with the rest of your school year and all the things that you have planned. And if you learned anything and you want to talk about it on social media, feel free to use the hashtags EcoLinks 2021 and take Enviro Educators, as well as now that we have Michael's Twitter as well, take a minute. I'm sure that would be super great. All right, well, thank you everyone. We are going to head off into our next meetings. Have a great night, everyone.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.